Indeed. Well, let's talk more. Disaster relief expert Jeff Charlton can join us now. I suppose a lot of people are asking, why did Japan build enormous nuclear facilities in such an active seismic zone?
Well, I think the nuclear power stations generally need water supplies, so it's quite reasonable to build them near the sea or by a water source. But I think what's surprising is that they've not taken account of potential tsunami, and it seems that the tsunami has knocked out the water cooling system. So I think that the International Atomic Energy Authority will probably be looking at why these safeguards didn't work.
Despite the fact that there's a 12-mile exclusion zone, some 180,000 people have been evacuated and about 160 have had to be taken to hospital with signs of low-level radiation exposure. In some senses, the Japanese government is playing down the difficulties there. But if somebody did have to protect themselves from radiation, how would they do it?
Well, the interesting thing is while they've called a hot zone of the 12-mile radius, they've evacuated people through that radius without any protection at all. And then when they get to the warm zone or the cold zone, they've actually checked them over for radiation contamination. Really, they should have been given some form of protection as they move through that hot zone. That would have been something like a hazmat hood, or equally, they were expected to be exposed to iodine-131, and they should have been provided with, possibly provided, or should have been provided with potassium iodine tablets before they actually made the route through that hot zone.
And what about elsewhere? We've heard that whole towns have literally been wiped out. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are in shelters. Is it quite easy for countries to become overwhelmed with dealing with such a large-scale tragedy as this?
Well, I think that this is almost a perfect storm in disasters. There's flooding, there's earthquakes, there's buildings destroyed and gone, there's infrastructure missing, there's going to be a failure in communications, power, food, water. Just about every type of shortage and disaster that you can imagine has been rolled into one in this event. I think something that I haven't heard so far is what contingency plans are in place for the next disaster, which could be, quite readily, the second earthquake, or more importantly, if we have meltdown in any of these three nuclear reactors and strontium-90 is released or cesium-135 is released, suddenly we're going to have people running around wondering what they can do to protect themselves then. And in my mind, plans should be in place to issue people with advice on what they should or shouldn't be doing. Certainly, normally, people would be told to stay indoors, but from what we've seen, there is no indoors. So I think people should be given advice now before panic and unnecessary loss of life or injury occurs.
Well, certainly the Japanese government is playing down that level of concern. But Jeff Charlton, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate your time. Well, the sun is beginning to set here in Japan. It is extremely cold at night. You have to fear for those people who haven't managed to take shelter because it's so cold. One wonders what they do. We'll have more rather in just a moment.
Well, when faced with destruction on the almost biblical scale that's been wrought on the northeastern coastline of Japanese waters, emergency workers, you said about doing, prioritising is obviously absolutely key to the work that those people have to do. Some of them have come from far afield, some of them indeed from the UK. Let's talk to Jeff Charlton, who is a disaster relief expert. Jeff, a very warm welcome to you. How do the emergency workers who are now in theatre, if you like, on station, on standby, in country, trying to deal with the aftermath of the tsunami in particular, how do they set about prioritising what they do? Are they responding purely to requests from the Japanese, or to an extent do they rely upon their own initiative?
Well, I think they've initially got to go with what the Japanese government or the local ground forces will give them indicators on, but I think that they're going to be very stretched on what information they've got. So I think it will be down to their own initiative to a great extent.
I just wonder how self-contained these teams are. I mean, we've come along with our tents and with our generators and all the rest of it so we can actually cope without the electricity, which is now certainly in parts of Tokyo, and I imagine parts of Japan on the coastline itself have been without electricity. How self-contained are the teams that come along? Because what they can't risk being is a hindrance rather than a help. They can't turn up and suddenly need helping out and distracting the emergency workers from the essential tasks that they've got.
Well, I think we'll find that the teams that Great Britain and America and the rest of the world have sent out, the help teams, will all be self-sufficient and carry all their food, water and self-preservation equipment. Absolutely no doubt on that. They would be specifically there to help and not to drain any local resources.
And what are the skills in particular that these individuals who join these international rescue programs and units, what are the specific skills they're bringing to bear? And imagining, obviously, people can handle search and rescue dogs are absolutely key, but what are the other suite of skills that are needed?
Well, I would hope that some of the search and rescue teams, these teams will go in with infrared cameras or with dogs that will sniff out carbon dioxide from people that are breathing and trapped underground. Those are very essential skills, but the people that are actually sweeping for survivors, there are only going to be some of those, and the majority of people that are going to be there will probably be medical people, but in my mind probably the most important people are the people that will do analysis on, is it safe to go in and move debris or parts of buildings to rescue people that are trapped or entombed. Quite often what may happen is that people can hear someone calling out and they're under tons and tons and tons of debris, but it's just not possible to get them out with the limited resources that the small team's got. So it's going to be a general team, but as I say, I think that the medical people, the search and rescue people, and the health and safety, not health and safety per se as we talk in the UK, but the health and safety structural engineer type people are very, very important.
Yeah, and it's a difficult calculation to make, isn't it, in terms of that health and safety? And I take the point you're making, Jeff, that it's not health and safety in that rather pejorative way that we've come to know it in the West, but the health and safety conditions that these rescue workers are currently embroiled in, it's a very different calculation because this is still very much an active earthquake zone. There are still lots of aftershocks, big aftershocks going on, and indeed, even here, we've heard the government say there is a 70% chance of a magnitude +7 earthquake in the next 7 days, and that's all going to weigh on the minds of rescue workers who've flown in, the lack of sleep, not sure what they're going to face, all that sort of stuff.
Well, I think some of the key points that's coming to light here is just how fragile the communication systems are. If we look at Tokyo for the moment, that's got rolling power cuts, just wonder, nobody at the moment has been given any information as to what to do if one of these power plants does explode. If it does have a meltdown and toxic clouds do flow away from the site, which they will do. We're near the sea, so there's going to be different types of winds that's going to push it different ways. Really, the rescue workers, the population and general people ought to be aware of which way the wind's blowing, which way the contamination may go, and the most important thing to me at the moment that I can see is how will you notify people that are in a rolling blackout that something's coming their way and what they should do. It's no good giving people advice when there's no electricity on. They won't hear it. So what contingency plans are happening at the moment?
Yeah, it's difficult to know, isn't it, for sure. Jeff Charlton, disaster relief expert. Jeff, thanks very much indeed for your expertise and your thoughts on the situation that some of the British and indeed other foreign disaster relief workers are currently getting involved in. Well, in a sense, the everyday